Oh, good grief. I think we're streaming. I think we're live. Man, I got morning voice like nobody's business. Oh, let's load Destiny 2. Let's load Destiny 2. I think that's how you spell that. Anyways, hello. Hello. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. We're going to be doing more of a off-the-cuff kind of yapathon Destiny rant stream. Are you... Brother! I just sat down! I'm not walking now. I'm not doing it. I just sat down. I just got up. No, no. I veto that one. I'll do it later. Let me go ahead and get into the game here real quick. Oh man. So today is going to be more of an unscripted, kind of note taken, kind of you put in the background kind of video where things that I'm going to be talking about are more or less pertaining to. Sure, Firebot's back up on top. Thanks, Firebot. Where we're basically going to be talking about um, the leaks and rumors surrounding the fact that Destiny 3 is being worked on, which honestly, yeah, makes sense. I mean, why would you not be working on Destiny 3 with the state of Destiny 2 right now in some tangential way? The other thing about it, though, that should be noted is there is nothing official. There is no sources. The source is currently the freaking, what is that, Max MFO thing where he's playing like Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, where it's Senator Armstrong being like, "I made it the frick up." So we got nothing to go on besides that. So today we are going to be yapping and talking about the current system changes that I want to see implemented with a Destiny 3, and I'm going to just start off the cuff with some of the stuff that I wrote down. Like I wasn't writing it down per se, but I started thinking about it on my way home after watching the recent video that Astacross put out, where it was basically him reacting to people saying that yeah, Destiny 3 is coming out and it's being worked on. So the biggest thing that I want them to do if they're making a Destiny 3 is do not, and I mean it sincerely because I will not want to touch this game, do not make me regrind for all the current exotics that exist in this game in Destiny 3 unless it's specifically tied to a raid, right? Like I'm gonna keep it a buck 50 with you. If I have to go through and regrind for a random drop of Arbalest, I'm gonna kill someone. All right, I'm gonna come unglued. I'm gonna get out of my chair. I'm gonna pick up my chair and I'm gonna beat you with it. All right, we're being violent today. We're coming hands and gloves off. So all exotic gear present in Destiny 2 needs to be available to you at launch. Now, what I mean by that is, yeah, you still have to acquire it, but you don't have to sit there and. No, it'll be in real life. The FBI knows it's Minecraft. Also, 5, congratulations. Obviously, they know I'm joking because I would not beat somebody to death with $100 chair. That's too much money to be using to kill someone. Um, for emphasis sake, we're also talking in a satirical sense. I'm not trying to be like actually bloodthirsty and violent. It's just this is going to wake you up and make you pay attention to the fact that we're streaming this early in the morning and we're not even like talking about it in the sense of like I haven't even posted anything to my social media, right? We're just coming off the cuff with this because I had a great Thanksgiving. I had a splendid day. I ate so much food. I got so freaking full of delicious homegrown, home cooked country freaking farm family food. All right, your boy did well. So, to my surprise, on my way home from there, I saw on my YouTube feed, because I basically, it's like a near 2.5 hour drive. So I was just like, yeah, you know what? I got YouTube Premium. Screw it. I'll just put some videos on in the background and listen to them as I'm driving. Like, I'm not going to be that crazy in Michigan and like text and drive. So that video came up, and I was like, you know what? All right, seeing how we're talking about Destiny 3, there are a couple things that need to be done to make it feel more like a Destiny 3, and then more so than just like Destiny 2, but with a new coat of paint, right? Like, from Destiny 1 to Destiny 2, we went from like 30 FPS, 70 field of vision to like uncapped FPS and adjustable field of vision on in the game, right? We also went from consoles to PC, huge win. We also went to cross-platform. We also went to cross-account. We there's a lot of changes, and we got loadouts. Like, we have loadouts now in the game, and subclass customization is at a state where it's really, really good. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the argument that's been on everybody's mind ever since they talked about making Destiny more like an MMO, and why people don't like that because, oh no, my looter shooter, is simply the fact that we need to make Destiny's identity the hybrid of both. What I mean by that is we need stat sticks for our MMO, and we need loot for the looter shooter part, right? So, in my opinion, and being a veteran of this game for as many freaking hours as I put into this stupid game, the easiest one I can think of off the top of my head is we redo the artifact system, we redo the ghost system, and we redo the weapons, and we redo armor, in the sense of, I like the tiered system. I think the tiered system is great. You have a very particular way to see how your stats will be affected by what you do. As you can see here, those are the stat numbers on the different tiers for the armor, where it shows how many stat points are on it, depending on tier. Like, you see, like, tier 1 is 52 stat points to 57, 58 to 63, 64 to 69, nice, 70 to 75, and then 75 plus stat tuning. Now, the stat tuning is just this thing right here, where it's like plus or minus per specific stat branch, right? And then they have a system in place for the game where you have all these different stat mods that help you kind of focus what you're looking for in your armor, right? Good changes. Like this. I enjoy it a lot. It makes the random aspect of trying to get specific armors in slots easier to obtain by actually having you focus and get the rolls you want, right? I'm running Starfire Protocol. It's a grenade heavy build. I want good grenade stat. In order to keep everything else in the engine feeling good, I want to have this much stats to make it feel good. 100 super is the fastest super cooldown you need, so on and so forth. So this right here is the stat stick we currently have in game that we get to mess with, right? Without sunsetting, I don't have to worry about trying to lose this gear. The only reason why I would chase something more is if I want these numbers to be more evenly coherent, right? Like this 3 on the weapon, I would rather that 3 be on my class. This 6 on the super, I would rather have that be split off and put into my grenade stat. You see what I mean? Even numbers, right? I want to be like, the focus for me now with my build is getting these numbers to all be even across all my different loadouts, right? And all my loadouts aren't really done because I haven't gone through and actually taken the time to like update my loadouts to the new system. I've gotten rid of all the old armor. I've been kind of messing with them as I go based off of my old exotics, because the new exotics, I don't like their stats. I like the old stats better. So, and I have a lot of those old exotics. So, in my opinion, bringing this tangent back on focus here, we need all exotic gear present in Destiny 2 available at Destiny 3 at launch, whether that be through you get to choose specific ones off the rip. You make your Guardian at the beginning, the Guardian that you want to be, you choose your things, you build accordingly, so on and so forth. So you would get a full loadout worth of gear off the rip to start the game with. And when I mean full loadout, I'm also talking like 4 or 6 aspects you get to play with off the Rift. I mean, your class abilities will still be the same. You'd get your melee choices, your grenade choices, and then your aspects. You would have to earn the other aspects through either paying for them with in game currency, doing quests, like your onboarding process. And by the time you're done with the onboarding process, you have a full element worth of subclass stuff available to you to use. Now, talking about the subclass though, what I would do differently than what Destiny 2 has is I would make everything under the prismatic umbrella. And what I mean by that is that on prismatic, you have your class abilities here, you have your all elements available for you in your like your light and dark, your grenades, melees, all that. Instead of just be limited to these ones, right? You would have all the strand grenades, you'd have all the stasis grenades, you'd have all the solar, you'd have all the avoid, you'd have all the arc, and all the aspects from every class of every subclass here. So like you would have all solar, you would have all of void, you would have all of stasis, you would have all of strand, you would have all of arc, so on and so forth. Right? You following me so far? I hope you are. We're moving kind of fast through this. With that, you would have it where there'd be bonuses associated per what you're doing based off of like your elements. So if you look here, you have 2 things you really can't change about your subclass elementalize. This one only has the little solar icon on it because it's an additional class ability from solar. So that's why that would be here. In the new system, you would just have the 3 or 4 class abilities, and we'll get to the 4th one later. That's when we talk about the new element we're going to be unlocking in Destiny 3 in its expansion, right? So anyways, so then you look at each part of your class that allows you to have elements of the same kind. You see how there's 5. You got your super, your melee, grenade, and your aspects. So depending on how many of these things you specifically choose to use per element gives you a bonus damage to that specific element to a specific percent, where it's not like a crazy amount of damage, but it is multiplicative to any other damage bonuses associated with that element. Meaning, if I'm running a full solar kit, I get innate bonus 20% damage to all outgoing solar damage, but I would lose the transcendent part of that loadout, right? So this wouldn't exist unless I mix elements around. Now, the reason why 20% doesn't feel high, but it being multiplicative, is that it stacks with other things. So, like with the Facet of Dawn, for example, powered melee hits against targets make you radiant. Radiant, I think, is a 20% weapon damage increase. So that would be in addition to the multiplicative damage increase for running a solar weapon already, right? So it incentivizes you to be, if you're going to choose an element, you can full send into that element for max damage. If you choose to be prismatic, you don't get as much of a percentage increase for each element you get, but you get access to the transcendent abilities. Now, the transcendent abilities will change based off of what your melee is, your grenade is, and what your super is. So, if your super, for example, in this case, is Song of Flame, my Transcendent Grenade will be a mixture of what the solar debuff is, which is Scorch. When a target is singed by destructive solar light, taking damage over time, the Scorch damage increases as the target accumulates more Scorch stats. So, it's a burn debuff. It's a damage over time debuff. And then if enough Scorch stacks burns accumulate, you get Ignitions, which are large solar explosions that deal damage in the area around the target and stuns unstoppable champions. So your Transcendent Grenade would scorch targets caught in your Transcendent Grenade, and it would also inherit the debuff from your equipped grenade. So if you're running a Storm Grenade, for example, the equipped debuff available to you is Jolt or Blind. So default Blind, with the fragment of dominance, it would then jolt instead. So you can see there's kind of like a build crafting element there to it, which then means your Transcendent Grenade can now deal with 2 of the champion types, which is important because we're not going to get rid of the champion type. We're going to embrace it more so than just it being a lock and key system. We want it to where it's like you have everything at your disposal, at your disposal to deal with champions in no matter what circumstance that you're caught in because of what your abilities do. Now, going back to the other part of Transcendence, your melee. So with your Transcendent melee, it wouldn't just be the melee you have on your class. It will be a melee that does the same thing as the grenade. Whereas in it does your 2 elemental debuffs that you have available to you, right? So you would have Arcane Needle, right? It unravels targets. That's the strand debuff. Where they do they're basically permeated with destructive stray matter. As they take additional damage, they create unraveling projectiles that seek nearby targets. So it's an AoE debuff in the same vein as Jolt is. So, as you're running Arcane Needle and you go Transcendent using a solar subclass, you would Scorch on hit, and then you would also unravel targets on hit. And as you defeat unraveled targets, they become tangles. So while that doesn't necessarily do anything off the rip, in tandem with doing this grenade, you can apply up to 3 different debuffs on one target depending on what your melee does, right? So like the Void melee would make targets volatile on Warlock. The Void melee on Hunter gives them weakened. The Void melee on Titan gives you an overshield. Best for your stream note. No. We don't do advertising here like that, Tenacious Township Spin. No. Get out of here. This is a Destiny 2 rant stream for what I want for Destiny 3. Not a place for you to break my rules and post links to things that are not relevant to the discussion. Be gone! Hot! God, I'm on one today. So, with these systems in mind, there will be 5 off the rip, 5 subclasses off the rip. You got your traditional ones. Yeah, no, it was a bot. I nuked them. They're dead. They're gone. They're obliterated. All right, they're banned. I don't do no bot advertising in my chat. There's only one bot allowed here, and that is EdBot. We love EdBot. EdBot stays. Everyone other bot goes. Well, besides like Stream Elements and the ones needed to make streams work, but whatever. So, in this all, the idea is that you get bonuses for your subclass synergy. Depending on what you choose, will also buff your other weapons. So, like, if I'm doing... I mean, kinda, but, like, he's power tripping. Let him be. I'm still working on the time for EdBot, like, when to post announcements and stuff like that. It's currently set to, like, every 7 minutes. I might need to make it 10, but we'll see. Anyways, where was I? So with the idea of like having transcendent abilities versus like the innate stacking multiplicative bonus for like matching elements to your weapon type, it still allows you to get to like if you're to min-max, which me, huge fan of min-maxing. It's why I like Solar Warlock. Why I like Prismatic Warlock so much is because I can min-max to deal with everything in the game and not have to worry about it. Sure, my damage isn't the highest. Sure, my gameplay can get a little stale and boring, but you know what I don't have to worry about? My team not doing their job. I don't have to worry about my teammate not having anti-barrier because I have anti-barrier at my disposal. I have anti-overload at my disposal. I have I have unstoppable at my disposal, right? I have all the things in my kit available for me to use in this loadout, and my min-maxing brain loves that, all right? I can never be weak at something if I'm just sort of good at everything. Anyways, so with that system in mind, so you would have all the different supers here, so like the pips here would just be for the element, and then you would choose the super in here. So like if you were to want to do solar supers, it would look like this. So you would click on the diamond for the solar icon, and you would have the 3 solar supers here. When you would click on the arc, you would have the 3. Yeah, there will be 3. There's not a third one right now. Arc supers available to you. And then strand, you would have the 3 strand supers available to you, so on and so forth, right? So I hear you at, so that's the next thing we're going to talk about, right? Is, well, there's only one strand super. There's only one stasis super. Well, in the beginning of Destiny 3, you would be unlocking those other supers. I don't know what they're going to be, but that's kind of what you're working towards, is getting the rest of the kit unlocked for these other subclasses that are missing supers. Nova on Warlock Void has all 3 supers. You don't have to worry about that. Arc, you would have 1 you would need to get. Strand, you need 2. Stasis, you need 2. And you get those through the campaign of the game as you go up and up and up, right? So now, let's go into talking about the new armor system that I have in mind. So we're basically going to introduce armor crafting, and I know that's going to get a lot of ire from people, but I need people to understand that I come from this from an aspect of we're making MMO mesh well with loot chase. Your stat sticks are what make an MMO work, and as you progress through an MMO, you make your stat stick bigger. So, through the playing of the game, like going through the campaign and doing stuff, your stat sticks will improve tier-wise, right? So, kind of how Monster Hunter will make you go through like low rank, high rank, master rank, similar idea. By the time you're done with the base campaign, you're in late high rank as far as gear is concerned, because the first part of the game is learning how the armor works. The second part of the game will be learning how the high rank and mod system works, and then the final part of the game is grinding for your specific stat stick that you want to have. In more than just acquiring loot, but in a way where you can upgrade your armor based off of the tier for gear that you sacrifice into. Everyone that I've talked to about crafting likes the idea of being able to dump similar tiered gear into an item to make it feel like it belongs to it. So like dumping the same grenadier stat rolled armor into a grenadier stat rolled armor to increase its stats. Excuse me. I need a drink. Hold on. My mouth is being weird right now. Give me a second. Oh, coming back to it. I'm talking about the new stat sticks. So these in an MMO would be like your stat sticks for the specific stuff that you are doing. With that, though, we need to make a couple sacrifices to how the system is right now, but not in the sense of ghosts changing in the way that you think I'm going to change them. For the most part, they're going to stay the same. They're just going to have more of an influence on your crafting and your loot drops. What I mean by that, your ghost will now be the source of gear tiers that, your gear that drops. And then it will also be a source of your weapons that drop, in the sense of like what rolls, what element, so on and so forth. So in this ghost slot, the whole blinding light, increase XP gains by 12%, everybody runs that already, so just make that the new default. You did it with resilience, do it with this, because there's no point in having this be a wasted thing. So you would get rid of this. This would no longer exist. The detectors, I would keep, but more so as a way to like reduce hood clutter. Because like, if you get rid of this, right? And people who like having this will get mad that they don't have a way to have this back. So something like this would stay, right? These though, get rid of them. They don't matter. I have not run a single glimmer boosting mod in years in this game, because we get enough glimmer to do everything that we need to do right now off the rip. So if these are to still be a thing, make the base floor of glimmer game 50%. That is essentially what, you know, 25. I mean, that's like half again as much glimmer. So, like, if I was to earn 1,000 glimmer, I would earn 1,500 glimmer, right? So, make that the new floor. This doesn't matter. Get rid of that. We would just now have these specific things in the ghost, along with those specific things in the ghost for weapons. So, armor would mostly stay the same. We'll talk about the new crafting system for armor here in a minute because my brain is so scattered. I'm going to focus on the new changes to the ghost and the artifact right now. So, the artifact. This system, kind of cool. Only problem I have with it, it sucks. And the reason why this sucks is because it doesn't allow you to specifically play in a way that is tangential to the way that you would want to play the game currently. Right? This season features a pretty good amount of different perks with different synergies that you have unlocked for your character to use, right? Like there are some fun ones here. But there's a lot of them that they just kind of feel like they don't necessarily belong in this season given what the element focuses are. Like energy acceleration. Um Yeah, we got a new a rocket pulse rifle, so like this kind of feels like it belongs. But out of the synergy available here, there's really nothing more so than like anti-barrier pulse or anti-barrier sidearm that could take advantage of micro missiles. Like there's micro missile grenade launchers. So what I would do with the new artifact system is I would have them based off of class, based off of weapon, and based off of element. So you would have a total of let's see here. Off the start, you would have a weapon one, you would have a class one. So depending on your class, obviously there's three there. But like at launch, you would have a total of 7 different artifacts that you can earn and get in the game. When you start the game, you start with the class one. That helps teach you the class identity of the character. So if you're choosing to play Warlock, you would get like a Warlock bond or something that's like a Warlock rated related totem or fetish or um, object, relic, whatever. So then that artifact would be related to what Warlock specifically do. Warlock class identity for the longest time has been support, has been support in the sense of like applying buffs, debuffs, empowering teammates, and then keeping everybody alive, right? That's what you do as a warlock. You are the well dealer, you are the divinity user, you use lunafaction boots, you use healing grenades. The base class identity for a warlock is support. So the first artifact you get teaches you the different things about being a warlock support in the same vein as an MMO does, like Final Fantasy XIV when you learn a job. The whole quest line for that job is related to learning what that class role is supposed to be. So with Warlock, you learn how to be a support. With Hunter, you learn how to be the ad clear DPS, which I know that's going to anger a lot of people because killing things is fun. Why would I play the game where I don't get to kill things? And then Titan is learning how to be the aggro puller, the tank, the guy that's basically there to help keep the aggro off everybody else. So you take those things, and that is what that artifact does. So Titan would have a bonus in their artifact where if they deflect damage with their barricade or prevent damage, they get increased cooldowns for anyone within the radius of the barricade. Hunters, when they dodge, they innately distract targets, which make them lose focus on the person that they're shooting. Warlocks, when you heal or empower a teammate, you basically get the Benevolent Dawn aspect, which is, where is that? I might have passed it already. Strength, solace. There it is. Ember of Benevolence. So this, when you get that, basically in the artifact, when you give a teammate a buff or a debuff to an enemy, you proc this, and then that helps you with your stuff for your class. So that is the base Warlock stat stick, and that seems pretty strong off the rip. Yeah, the idea is that unless you want to for your stat sticks for like specific classes, like your energy for your subclass, you go through and do that. And then by the end of that part of the campaign, once you basically get the gameplay loop of what your character is supposed to do, you then get your first, we're going to call it prismatic because that's kind of what the system is. You'll get your prismatic artifact, where the prismatic artifact is more of a mix of your elements and then your class identity. So like if we were to do a paint, so if we were to do, we'll just do a quick paint document here, so we're not flashbanging everybody. We'll make it here. So when we look at the artifact stat stick being this, right? So this is your stat stick for your artifact. I mean, there's going to be more perks in it. The level of, so like when you're dealing, so we'll do red for class, yellow for weapon, purple for element, right? So we got class, weapon, element. So for class on the starting one, it is a majority of it is red, and then your element, so it would be the next big chunk of it, and then the rest would be yellow. So like if we were to fill this in with paint real quick, you would have that much element, that much class, or sorry, weapon, that much class. So that's your first stat stick, right? This is teaching you the bare bones of the game. When we get to the prismatic one, the majority of it would be stuff that helps boost what your elements do. The next amount being basically a 50-50 between the two. So like 50% of the artifact deals with elements, 25% deals with weapons, the other 25% being your class identity, right? And they would basically borrow from those specific ones, right? So like the full weapon artifact purely is just stuff that deals with weapons. And it is things that help like with automatics, precisions, heavies, energy, ammo generation, so on and so forth, right? So the mixture of this will kind of lean into like what weapons feel best for each role, right? A scout rifle feels good for a warlock because you don't want to be in the middle of the fight as a warlock. You want to keep your distance, you want to have range so that you're not one pulling aggro from the tank, two you're not getting in the way of your DPS, your hunter, your ad clear, and three you can see the people you're fighting from a distance, right? So if I'm a warlock, right, the ideal warlock loadout is essentially range with maybe a close range like workhorse tool gun to kind of keep, so if like an ad gets through and you need to kill it, you have a way to help, right? If your ad clear needs help, you have a way to help. Stuff like that, right? Like if you look at my midi tool, it is purely a stat stick weapon, right? I have a way to generate orbs on it, and I have a way to dish out elemental debuffs. Burning Ambition sucks, needs a buff. Fight me. With that in mind, the artifacts would lead into this system here where you go in and each artifact is now a stat stick specifically set for the jobs that you were doing, right? So you'll have you'd have a purple stat stick for elements at some point. You'll have a you'll have one for elements, one for weapon. I really don't like how they changed that in paint. It drives me up a wall every time I do it. So like you'd have one that's class, one that's weapon, one that's element, right? You'd have all these things here. Copilot sucks. You'd have all these things here as different types of stat sticks that you would get at the start. So basically you're getting one that's element, one that's class, one that's weapons, and the element one is more so geared towards using the prismatic approach. So it's, a mixture of all these different elemental types, right? So it's like, it's all the elements in the game are in this artifact with basic boosts to them. The other incentives for things like running a full subclass element, like one full element in a subclass versus running prismatic, will also kind of tie into some of the innate abilities of the solo class versus the full transcendent kit, right? So with stasis, for example, off the rip, I have access to things that freeze right away, right? The only way that I would be able to use these in the prismatic loadout is by choosing them specifically. And then, like I wouldn't, but I wouldn't have a way in prismatic to where something like, well, maybe that's not actually a great idea. Never mind. So to make more incentive for running a full subclass of abilities and aspects would be the fact, besides your weapons get buffed, um, if you get pickups, the specific pickups from class. So like, do I have fire sprite? Do we have a thing for that here? I don't know if we have a thing for it here in this, but basically, like a fire sprite gives you ability energy. So what we would do is you usually get a pickup from getting ability kill based off of that specific elemental kill, right? So like a solar powered melee kill would give you a fire sprite. A solar powered grenade kill would give you a fire sprite. When you pick those up, they give you energy back to your solar related things. So like if I'm running a solar super with solar grenade melee, whenever I pick up a solar like a fire sprite, I gain increased energy for that back based off of the how much is being used in the subclass, right? So if it's 5% per thing used, so like if I'm running, like let's say I'm choosing to do on prismatic, I'm bouncing back and forth, I know. If I'm using, like let's say I'm doing this, right? I got my solar super, an arc, and a 2 arc abilities here. When I pick up a ionic trace, I would get more energy back for these in comparison to what energy I would get for my super, right? So like the super ability energy would be like 5%, just throwing out a number there. And then these would be 10%. That's multiplicative. So in order to balance things out in the game, ability time would have to drop down by a percentage. I'm not sure what that percentage would be. I'm not the one that has the ability to test that right now. The closest I can do to testing this is kind of like build crafting into the specific system in a way that doesn't technically exist yet. So, anyways, so when you're doing more of an incentive to run a solo element class out of prismatic would be things that tie into your cooldown regeneration based off of how many of that specific thing you're running. So if we're doing 5 per, the people that are quick with math will notice that if I'm running all 5, that's 25% reduced cooldown on picking up one of those elemental pips, right? So now I hear you ask, well, how do orbs of power work? Orbs of power are going to be gone in Destiny 3. They're going to be replaced with what I'm going to just call the elemental pickups. So there are now elemental pickups for everything in the game. And I'm not talking in the sense of like pickups like picking up a Warmind cell and throwing it. Those won't be a thing in this system. Tangles will still exist, but you'll get tangle threads based off of kills with a tangle killed. So like if you've played the Lightfall campaign, when you could like embrace the strand or whatever, or like go in Baja Blast mode. That little like green squiggly that was there. Let's pull up my paint board here. That green squiggly, when you pick that up, it would boost your strand abilities. And if you were to pick up a tangle, it would also boost your strand abilities. So that would be the advantage of running strand still, would be you generate tangles and you generate these threads on kill that would act as one of those power pickups. So then I hear you ask, well, what about perks like attrition orbs? We're going to get there, but because we're talking about it now and I'm scatterbrained, we're going to mention it now. Attrition orbs, perks like this, will now instead be related to the element of the weapon that it is. So instead of it generating orbs of power, like this would be, it would generate fire sprites. If it was to be a strand weapon with attrition orbs on it, it would be strand thread generation, right? You know, threads of the weave or whatever, right? That would be something that the weapon can have, not as a perk, but as an origin trait. So, continuing on with the stat 6 of weapons, the origin trait system will need to change in order to accommodate what we're doing here, and weapons will need to change according to what we're going to be doing at launch. So, weapons now will be something where you get a drop in the wild for a base version of a weapon. So, let's say what would be a tier. Do I have one on? I think I actually have a tier. Yeah, we got a crafted weapon here. So, in the wild, a weapon will drop with, let's say, 2 perks here, 2 perks here in each column, and then the origin trait of the destination, right? So, like your hot swap, your let's say you're doing things on Venus, because it's going to be all destinations across all Destiny games as visitable locations to an extent. There are going to be some that we can't access because, well, they don't exist anymore or were destroyed. But each locale will have a drop, an origin trait drop on the weapon that you get by default. So let's say if we're going to, I don't have one on. Let's say we're going to go to Venus. I'm gonna pull this to my warlock real quick. So the perk for Venus weapons could be something like Time Lost Magazine, where you would want to focus on farming for weapons on Venus, right? Because this origin trait is really, really good. So you'll spend a lot of time on Venus working for this origin trait. However, you can end up getting that origin trait on a weapon on what will be a crafted weapon eventually. So how that system is going to work with crafted weapons is basically you build the stat stick weapon that you want. It's not going to be as strong as what would be like currently a tier 5 weapon because it won't have as many perks available to on it. At most, it will have the, what would that be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12 perks on it. So the idea would be is you can choose up to 12 different perks you want in a gun based off of what you want that gun to do when you're crafting it. But in order to craft it, you need to find a gun that has some of the stats you want on it already to begin with. So when you would go to the Enclave, and we'll actually just do that right now so you can kind of see what I'm going to be talking about here. When you go to where it would be weapon crafting at, which it's probably not going to be the Enclave, but we're just going to go here. You would have the options to go through and choose stats you want from guns that you would dismantle in this system. So, like, naturally, yeah, you can scrap weapons you want right now, but you don't want to necessarily scrap something that has a perk on it you want. You would want it to go to your vault, right? We would have a vault system in the weapon crafting system where you could choose a perk you want, like focus and attune a perk, and whenever you get a drop of that perk, instead of being able to dismantle it, you would send it to the gunsmith, which the gunsmith is not this is the Enclave. But when you send it to the gunsmith, it creates its own inventory of weapons that you have access to. So as you can see here, you have all these different weapon slots already in the game. I'm just going to highlight that because I forgot that I got that done recently. As you can see, you'd have all the weapons available to you in the game that you can choose to craft. And what it will say is it'll have the weapon highlighted like this, where you can like see that I can craft it, and it'll have a number next to it with how many weapons I have for it, right? So when I go to select, let's do come to pass because it's right there. When I go to select the perks, obviously I would choose the frame. Now we're going to change what the frame does because this will now be what the weapon RPM is in the sense of how you would go through and craft the weapons for the specific things that you do, like your rate of fire and stuff like that, and origin traits, right? So the weapon frame will now have more than just being able to choose like long range, slow firing, and high damage, right? You would also be able to choose like the lightweight frame buff on it. So if I go to Is there a lightweight frame? Craftable auto rifle? I don't think there is. There's not. So if I was to go to a lightweight frame weapon, right? Like Callus Mini Tool. If I was to choose... Okay, well, it doesn't show lightweight frame there. One of these is lightweight frame. You? Yeah, it is. So, you know, superb handily move faster with this weapon equipped. It would just be a boost to your mobility innately, right? So mobility in the game is at a big stat. That will be a weapon that would bring it up. Kind of like how it works now. But with the weapons, you could choose their frame and then their firing rate. But certain frames can only have certain RPM limits, right? So like the highest that a low impact auto rifle could go to would be, or the highest would be 450, a same fire rate as a precision frame. But a precision frame can go from 450 to 600. An adaptive would be 600 to 750, so on and so forth. And you would add in different archetypes and frames available to craft on your sticked weapon. So, but in order to do that, you would need to get a weapon that has that frame on it. So, as I'm playing the game, I get a random drop of Come to Pass. You know, it is a high impact frame with the RPM of 450. That is the highest that a high impact frame can go. I want a high impact frame auto rifle. I would send that to the gunsmith. So I would mark that perk here as a perk I want, and then the gunsmith would then take that, like when I go to dismantle it, instead of dismantling it, they'll send it to the gunsmith, and it would come here as a stack. So then I'd have one weapon at the gunsmith that I can work with. As I play and keep collecting the different weapon, like that one specific auto rifle, I'll eventually get to the point where I have enough of these auto rifles to then scrap them all into the crafted weapon that I want, because it'll have every perk that I want. It'll have every it'll have the RPM I want available for it. It would have all the specific stats, because the crafting on this will then extend outside of just the barrels, the perks, and those things on it. We're going to be getting rid of the enhanced perks, because the enhanced perk stats will just be what the weapon's baked to anyways. When you mastercraft a weapon, you know, getting the masterwork on it like this, that will actually go into choosing 2 origin traits on a weapon. And with a crafted weapon, you would be able to do so, but you wouldn't be able to get as many options as you could on a tier 5 equivalent of a weapon, right? So like if you look at my tier 5 Traxinus here, you see I got all these perks enhanced. They wouldn't be enhanced. They would just be what is considered master crafted. So when I get a tier 5 master crafted weapon, which could only, a tier 5 equivalent master crafted weapon can only drop in as a random drop. You can't craft to that. It's a specific, like a curated roll, like a pinnacle roll that you can get that has the ability to roll with a perk combination that you like on here. This stinking shotgun is so gosh darn close to the exact 5 out of 5 out of 5 perk roll that I want on this thing. The only thing I don't want on this thing is proximity power and these barrel perks. I mean, smoothbore is pretty good, but I would rather have something else there. But anyway, so like a master crafted weapon would have, it would come with 3 different origin traits that you could choose 2 out of to use, and they're random based on location. And then, so like if you wanted the origin trait of, let's say tenacity, when targets are nearby, final blows grant weapon damage and improved amount of reload speed and handling until the wielder's death. You could have this activated with something like Vice Stinger on, which would be specific to the weapon frame itself. So the weapon frames would still have a foundry owner, which is one of the other perks that would be on the weapon when you find it on the ground, right? So if I pick up a this is a Mida tool. There's no, do I even have anything that would be like a Suros weapon handy? I don't. Oh, okay. So this sword's Hake, right? This is a Hake sword because you see the little Hake H there. I think that's what that's supposed to be. I'm not sure. So you would see the foundry there of what the weapon is, and that dictates what the weapon looks like. So if you look at collections, and let's say that's interesting. I guess it's because I'm still here. So if I go into my specific weapon collection, you can see that each weapon kind of has its own look. So like Vanguard weapons would look kind of like this kind of style, where it's like, your sleek, this frame. Let's say this is a Vanguard weapon, so it would have the Vanguard origin trait on it, or like your Tower origin trait, right? So you'd have your Tower origin trait weapon. You would have your Hake origin trait weapon, which would look like a Hake weapon, right? So like you would choose the base look of the gun is what gives it the base perk. There are going to be some weapons that are exemptions to this, and we'll get to those when we talk about raids. So your basic stat stick weapons will kind of all have a very basic, simple look to them based off of where you get them from on the location of plans, right? As you progress and get through the end game, that's when you start seeing guns that look a little bit more like enemy weapons, like Eidolon Ally here, having that more hive aesthetic to it. Abyss Defiant, which this would still be like a raid gun, basically. But this is what raid guns would kind of look like. They would have that more done up, themed look to them of the race or where you acquired the weapon from. So, like, Veiled Threat design would be like one of the designs for auto rifles that you would have if you got them from the Vex. If you went through like Deepstone Crypt, you would have this more like Braytech look to the weapons. You would have, if you do Trials of Osiris, you would have this more like the classic D1 look to guns, all done up with the Osiris stuff on it. If you're to do Gambit weapons, they would have that. And so basically, the majority of the stat sticks would be derived from what the base origin trait is on the gun, which is the one that would drop from the location. So like a specific Vanguard weapon would look like a Vanguard weapon and have the Vanguard origin trait on it. Or like the Gambit weapon will have the Gambit origin trait on it. And those would kind of tie into the activity that you got them from as a boon to that activity. Kind of like how some of the ones worked from before. Like the, I think this one has it on there. Yeah, like Roar Battle is a specific Crucible perk. But it can be used in PvE as much as it can be in PvP. And this one, while it is more of a perk for dealing with endgame stuff like the Vanguard, having bonus damage resistance, you could still kind of use that in Crucible. It wouldn't be much, but it would be enough to where you could notice it, right? So the weapon system would change into being like the majority of the new gear that would drop in the game would just be different looking gear, but it would still have an origin trait assigned to it from where it came from. And as you got enough of that weapon to specifically drop for you, you could then take it to send it to the gunsmith and then forge the weapon that you specifically wanted out of the different drops that you got. Depending on what ones you want to craft, you would need so many perks, so on and so forth. And then you would craft your base version of the gun, which the base version of the gun would just be one row of traits. So like your barrel, your ammo, your mag, your perk 1, perk 2, origin trait, right? And then at tier 2 you would get another origin trait here. The tier system will change accordingly, because it's like, well, then you're not really going up to tier 4, are you? You're going to tier 3. Yes. So you would get to the point where you have a tiered weapon with the different origin traits on it that you want based off of weapons you sacrifice to it. So you would choose the frame that you like, the look of the weapon. You would choose the rate of fire of the weapon based off of the build type of the weapon. So you got your foundry frame, you got your build frame, and then you got your RPM. Those are things you would be able to choose on a crafted weapon, and then you add the perks in according to what weapons you have available to you. You'll also notice I haven't mentioned anything about elements yet, and that's because weapons, when you craft them, you can choose what elements you want on them. As a world drop, they drop with whatever element you're currently equipped with in your ghost. So with your ghost, you can choose for weapons now. You can focus one specific thing for each gun in the base essence of what the gun is. So on my Ghost, I would have slots here similar to these, where I would choose I want this frame, RP build frame, so like high impact, lightweight, precision, adaptive, so on and so forth, and it would have that as one option. I would then choose the element that I want, and then I would choose the let's say, like, if I want to focus column. So when I say column 1 and column 2, I mean column 1 and column 2 for my weapon perks. So I would choose what one I would want to focus a stat in more so. So I would be able to choose, my stat stick for what I want it to do. Like, do I want it to be a buff? Do I want it to be a damage buff? Do I want it to be a class related buff, like an elemental buff? Or do I want it to be a damage buff? So, like, I could go in and let's say I'm trying to get a Mida mini tool to drop, right? Perfect example, I got the weapon right here. I got the roll I want. So when I go in to my Ghost, I would choose the lightweight build frame. So drop as a lightweight. I could choose the RPM, rate of fire on the gun that I would want. And then I would be able to choose the rate of fire, the frame, the let's see here. And then, like, what perk do I want to focus? Do I want to focus damage? Do I want to focus elemental? Do I want to focus on empowering? Do I want to focus on debuffing? So on and so forth. So there'd be pips. And out of those, I could only choose one. But with the new crafting system, because I'm basically just looking for perks at a time, I can then just focus on getting those perks and basically collecting enough guns to build the crafted weapon I want. So over the course of getting, let's say, 7 auto rifles that have the perks in it I want, I would eventually get to the point where I could take those 7 rifles and have the gunsmith tell me how many of those frames I have available. So all the weapons that I send to the gunsmith will go to the gunsmith. He'll go in, look through all of the different weapons that I have at my disposal to find weapons of each of those perks. So, and then sweet, I have my base weapon done. Now, to upgrade the weapon specifically, like bring it up a tier as far as like how many perks I could slap on it, I would need to find 7 more, but of that specific gun. And I know what you're thinking. That's a lot of guns you have to look through. Like, if you look through how many auto rifles we have alone in the game right now, we have a ton. Granted, with the new system, the weapon variety will be severely diminished because of the fact that there aren't so many weapons needed now, because like half these guns are sunset, half these guns are craftable. They would be more so streamlined and focused into like maybe, what is this, 21? Maybe 20, like 32, 40 weapons at most. Right? Going something like that, because you'll have 5 elements off the rip. You'll have all the different RPMs and frames you want off the rip. So when you look at the weapon system currently in the game, right, with how many different auto rifles there are, if there are only, let's just say for easy math, because it's right here, 20, just 20 auto rifles, right? Because you have 4 different frames of auto rifles. You would only need to get the specific weapon drop. It doesn't matter what element it is. It doesn't matter what the frame is of it. It is just the weapon itself. It has to be a matching weapon. So if I get 7 of the same 7 come to passes, I can then upgrade the crafted tier on the weapon and make it stronger. It would enhance its stats. It would enhance, the stuff like that. So like enhanced perks would exist, but it would be more so in the sense of like, now a tier 5 is all enhanced. It would just be, that's the base of a weapon, is those. And then it would be things along the lines of how the gun functions. So like it would give a bigger boost to mobility. It would do more damage. It would do more. Right? But they cap at tier 4 for those stats. Once you hit to the tier 4 stats, you get a flat additive 10% in total to what the weapon can do. So like if Radiant would make you do 20%, it would be an additive 10% to that at a tier 4. A master crafted weapon would be more so related to end game stuff. So like if you get a master crafted raid weapon to drop, it would be the best of the best that raid weapon could be. And instead of being, because the thing is like you don't want to alienate the fan base from being like, oh well, the loot grind doesn't matter if it's more efficient just to craft the weapon. But these master crafted weapons have more variety to them built in because you can choose things off the rip for them according to what the full weapon sandbox is. You're not limited to things like your RPM for the gun. You're not limited to things like the build frame of the gun. You can specifically go in and choose those specific things accordingly. Again, there's still limitations in place, like you can't have a high impact auto rifle be firing at 900 rounds per minute. That's a little ridiculous. It would still be within the confines of what that weapon is. So like a mastercrafted raid weapon, if you were to get a mastercrafted Fatebringer to drop, you would be able to choose the rate of fire and frame type along with what you have on the gun already. So like you could go in and choose the specific 3 perks that you wanted at the gunsmith without any cost to you through the gunsmith, because it's mastercrafted. It has everything available on it. You just need to go to the gunsmith to choose it. You would have a random roll that drops on it. For an example, you could get a random rolled Surf and Haze where it has perks on it that are really good, but then you could specifically go in and choose the 15 perks you want on it because it's a mastercrafted weapon out of the plethora of ones available to you. Again, attrition orbs would be an origin trait, and on mastercrafted weapons you can choose 2 origin traits at any time. So if you like attrition orbs on your guns, you can always have attrition orbs on it. If you like having tenacity on Seraphin Haze, you would choose tenacity and attrition orbs if you want this to be a workhorse gun. That would also eliminate a lot of the perk pool, because a lot of the perks that are tied to like demolitionist, collective pugilism, or no, that's not the pugilist perk. What is the pugilist perk again? I have a weapon with it. It's where's Dim? Exact perk pugilist. So pugilist as a perk, which will pull this to my warlock on Kvostov, right? So these would all be origin traits you could choose on the gun as well. So like demolitionist would be an origin trait, pugilist would be an origin trait, strategist would be an origin trait. Those would all be perks that would exist as origin traits on the gun. You wouldn't have to use them as a perk. You would get to use them as an origin trait. So like these 4 perks right here on Vostov, all would be here as origin traits that you could choose from, along with like dealer's choice. So then, well, what about kinetic weapons? How do we make kinetic weapons feel good? Because if all elemental weapons can have their elemental weapon debuffs, what would be some of the other perks you have? Well, you'd still have things like rapid hit, you'd still have things like auto-loading holster, reconstruction, ambitious assassin, envious assassin, bait, those different perks would exist. And then you would also have your elemental perks on a weapon as well. We would still allow for like cross core. I say cross core, that's not really correct. Cross column perks. So like you'd have some elemental, some of the regular ones. So if you want to focus purely on a stat stick gun, like a good example would be this. If I was to focus on my MIDI tool to be a perfectly pure stat rolled gun with like, I want this to be my stat workhorse for my weapon slot, my primary, I would have it where it's incandescent and burning ambition with the origin trait attrition orbs on it and Vanguard determination, because the whole point of this gun is to keep myself alive and keep teammates alive, along with spreading out my elemental debuff to help with my subclass synergy, right? So with that in mind, there's your new stat sticks. Your loot chase now will be derived into looking for the specific weapons that have everything on it you're already after. So an example would be like with weapons, you would get mastercrafted drops from the end of a raid. You would get, you know, 3 characters. You would get 3 per character a week, giving a total 9. Most raids don't have. That's not the Vow to Disciple tab. There we go. So most raids would still only have a handful of weapons, right? You wouldn't have every weapon available in the raid. You could do it eventually where there is, but a lot of that stuff will kind of still be like part of the raid chase is looking for these specific 6 weapons as mastercrafted weapons. You couldn't craft these weapons at all. We would make it so that crafted weapons only exist for world drops. Raid and dungeon gear, and let's say end game PvP, so like Trials of Osiris, those weapons are specific to the end game alone. If you wanted to get Cataclysm, you would have to do Vow of the Disciple. If you wanted to do Cataclysm, that's a mastercrafted weapon, you would have to do Vow of the Disciple and show mastery of Vow of the Disciple, meaning you would have to have every I mean, this would change, of course. These frivolous parts of the collection badge won't exist. But if you were to do you would need mastery over the entire thing to get mastercrafted gear. You would need to show that you have everything unlocked and you've done the bare minimum for it outside of like these specific challenges. So like if we go to Vow of the Disciple specifically here, which is here. So in Vow of the Disciple, you see how it has like all these different perks, different challenges to help you with the exotic. It would be more so ones that show mastery of it more so than like subclass specific. So like, for example, Dark Flame wants you to beat it with a fire team made of entirely solar subclasses. Wouldn't it be needed? That doesn't really show mastery over the raid as much as it just shows that your clan is all good, or the group that you're with is all good at running that specific subclass. That wouldn't count. However, Swift Destruction as a challenge, that counts. That counts as mastery over the raid. This challenge counts. This would go. Only kill baited adherents when they're starting attacking the obelisks in acquisition. So those would show mastery over the raid, right? Those kind of challenges would show mastery over the raid. The things that give you double loot, that would show mastery over the raid. Like being able to defeat Taniks during Deepstone Crypt. Where the Deepstone Crypt. So like the Taniks one, where it's like, where is the Taniks one? The Core 4. When you with Taniks, he has those shank jetpacks on his sides. If you do the Core 4, what that challenge means is you break all 4 at once. It rewards you in Deepstone Crypt because you get an extended damage phase for doing that. But, that allows you to, do this. That would show mastery over the raid, which then would unlock the ability to get mastercrafted weapons. So, until you get to the mastercrafted weapons, when you're doing, I don't have, I have almost everything here in Vault of Glass. But as you can see, when I would do, it's so weird how they have this lined up. So, I mean, yeah, there's 6 weapons that you would get from Vault of Glass. There are armor pieces you would get from Vault of Glass specific to your class. There's a raid exotic. There is some frivolous stuff here. The frivolous stuff wouldn't matter. Having the raid exotic wouldn't necessarily matter. You could still get a drop as a random drop, obviously. But you would get rewarded this automatically once you hit master class of the raid. So when you've completed all the challenges associated with the raid, so like, as we were looking at Vow of the Disciple earlier, I have me right here still. As we were looking at Vow of the Disciple earlier, it would be the specific challenges for it. So like beating out a master, beating it with these different things would be the only way you could get a master crafted weapon or armor from the raid. The master crafted weapons would allow you to go in and specifically choose the perks from the raid available to you at your disposal. We would be bringing back raid specific perks because it'd be the reason why you would do that stuff. And those would exist in the sense of like you got your end game PvP, which is trials. You have your end game PvP or PvE, which is your raids, your dungeons, your raids, your dungeons, your Grandmaster Nightfalls, Conquest, whatever they're going to be called in the future. Those would be things that you would have at your disposal to acquire those. And because there's going to be so many available to you at launch, if we're to keep the current system of what's all available here. So like if we look at the destinations, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Just alone in Destiny 2, you have 10 different ones, right? Right here on the destination, there's 10. There's technically more than that because you got Kepler. And then if you also include like Venus, Io, Saturn, all these different locations, each location will have a raid associated with it, right? So like you got a raid, you got a dungeon, and you got a Grandmaster Conquest thing associated with it, which the Grandmaster Conquest would probably be like, something specific to it. So if we look here and go to like the Conquest tab, the Play Now tab, you see how there's like, oh, Devil Slayer, that's a strike. That would be something that would be like the Grandmaster Conquest would be the thing that gives you Master Crafted gear. And the Master Crafted gear is specifically tied to the drops from that strike, because we'll be bringing back strike specific loot, but it will be in the sense of more so like you can craft something to look like that versus like becoming that specifically, because we're introducing transmog for everything in the game, including exotics, including weapons, including ghosts, whatever. Transmog full throughout the game, because at the end of the day, most of the things you're looking for will come from mastery. Like if you want the specific ornament for Vault of Glass, once you get an armor that drops with this, boom, you have that available to transmog underneath using material costs that you earn in game. So if I wanted to have this available to me, I would have to earn the base piece of the armor and then pay Glimmer to make it a transmoggable piece of armor. I wouldn't have it tied to the cash shop. I would have it as something that you would earn from there. To address cash shop while we're talking about that, the cash shop would exist in the same vein that it is, where it's like it is good looking stuff, but I would have it where Bright Dust as a currency is something you can earn more of, and you would be able to earn silver through doing pinnacle endgame activities. So like doing Grandmasters, doing trials, doing all these other different things would give you silver. Now granted, it won't be a ton of silver. It will still be a good amount of Bright Dust, but it will not be a ton of silver. It would be like you can earn a max of 100 silver a week. And the reason why I say that is because as it is a business, and as much as it sucks, with how the current system is right now, if we were to also make it where you can earn silver in the game, this stuff will skyrocket in price unless you only get like maybe 10 a week. 10 to 100 silver a week. This still needs to stay low so that Bungie can have a way to get money out of you. It is unfortunate, but if we're looking at all the different stuff in the game, the reason why this stuff exists as it does, and this is some of the best looking gear, except for that, best looking gear in the game, is because of the fact that this is what people are willing to pay for. Would I like to be able to get a Taken Knife Warlock set of armor for showing mastery over, King Fall raid or Ghosts of the Deep dungeon? 100% I would rather that. But they're not going to do that. They're going to rather have that be in the cash shop. Just is what it is. So, unfortunately, we won't be able to change that. Pipe Dream would be all earnable in game. Not given a rate of how, but it would be cool to have that be a thing where you can earn that all in game. So let's go back to Orbit. Because now, we've talked about it a little bit. We're going to go back to talking about more of the MMO side of the game and the loot chase and how to balance that all out. So, much like you can with weapons, you'll be able to craft armor in the same vein as how weapons work. So what you would need to do is collect the different stat distributions of, your grenade, your, like, if you want Grenader, you want Grenadier, whatever. You want your different, like, Gunner, you want your different, you want your Gunner, Bulwark, Specialist, Paragon, Brawler, different ones. Those would still be a thing. The reason why those would still be a thing is because with the new changes to the artifact, once you've maxed out the level in an artifact, you get the ability to choose stats per category of your class. So, what I mean by that is once you fill out the artifact, you get 300 stats that you can use across all of your stats here. So, you can choose to put 50 in every slot if you want. The difference being is that with your armor, it would only give you up to 100 stat, 600, the same amount per everything else. It would suck because now the stat numbers feel a lot lower, but half of your stat pool comes from your stat stick. So if you want to have full 6-100 gear, you would need to still farm for the specific armor pieces and flex the artifact around to match those specific stat distributions, right? So if you want 135 grenade, well, you could use 135 stats out of your artifact to make your grenade that level. And then you would have the rest of whatever that equals out to, stat-wise, out of that. So if we're looking at a total of, 600? Break out the calculator. If we're looking at a total of, like, at least you get 600 stats in total in-game, right? 600 stats. You would get 300 from the artifact. So if we take 135 out of the artifact, that leaves us with 165 stats we get to use across the rest of the stats we have available to us. Which means you could use 100 elsewhere and then 65 elsewhere, right? So you could go in and choose those stats wherever you want them to be. Split them up however you want. That's the artifact, right? The artifact contributes 300 of your stats to your stat total, right? That we're going to keep the system like this in the sense of the max you can go to is 200 because the first 100 deals with your cooldowns, deals with your base of the weapon, right? With certain things. I don't even know off the top of my head what the 100 weapons actually is. I think I can get to it. I just need to move 3 things over to it. So base 100 weapon. It's 103. I can deal with that real quick, I think. Balance tuning. Anyways. So 100 is basically 10% handling and reloading and 15% additional damage for having a 100 weapon, right? Everything else depends on the primary special, ammo brick, percent chance, all that stuff, right? So at base, if you want to have just the base 100 stats, easy peasy lemon squeezy, you can do it. I don't remember where I have my stat splits at, so I'm just going to cheat and put back on. Here. I should have saved that load up before I did that. Oh well. We can go back and min-max later. So as you play, you would be able to go through and like choose the specific things accordingly based off of what you need in addition to, right? So your armor can get your base armor. I should clarify, base armor can get you to another additional 300 stats. Artifact gives you a base 300 stats, which means technically, yeah, you're at 200 for everything else. But with the mods, they work more so in the sense of tuning. So you wouldn't have these kind of mods here anymore. These wouldn't exist. It would all be tuning. And tuning would be based off of the armor tier, here capping at 4. So tier 1, you get no tuning. Tier 2, you get a percent of tuning. Tier 3, you get a percent of tuning. Tier 4, you get a percent of tuning. Anything else, it's the same as tier 4. So the grind for specific stat focusing will end at tier 4, and then tier 5 and Mastercrafted tier 5 would end up being at the specific of like you can move up to 10 stat points or whatever on the armor specifically. So like if you like go for, you get a roll that's Paragon, that's melee, grenade, and super, you could choose where you want the stats in that list to go accordingly, right? So an example would be on this class item, I would choose the tuning. We'll just go to the boots because you can actually see it. I would choose to tune which one I want brought up by sacrificing what stat I want to get down. So like you would have, this would be changed to where it's like you can choose what stat you wish to lower and then what stat you wish to enhance for lowering that stat. So let's say you don't really care for weapons. As you can see, really don't care about weapons because with Prismatic, I'm not really doing weapon damage, I'm doing ability damage. So I would sacrifice my weapon stat to get all these other stats to where I need them. I would min-max accordingly based off of how many stat points I can move. With the system, yeah, you would move from like 5 to 10 to 15 to 20, let's say, right? You can move up to 20 stats per thing. So then that allows you to kind of like move stats around accordingly. Everything caps at 200. So then you start to ask, well, what about things like firepower, grenade font, and this stuff, right? So grenade font in Kickstart would become one specific mod, I think is what I wrote down. So you would basically go in and have it where it's like these kind of mods would exist together as one. So like even though you're already at max stat, or like if you do 200 melee, you're already at max. If you want to go over 200, you need to use this mod, right? Like it doesn't work in game, but it would work in that system. So all these different fonts would be the only way you could go up over that, and that's through Charge with Power. Charge with Power will now work in the sense of it's not orbs of power you pick up, it's elemental power. It's elemental pickups, right? So those fire sprites, the strand threads, all those different things, those are what lead into the stacks on stacks. That's what leads into these different things. So these would all exist as one thing. So these things would be the things that allow you to go in to get your charged with light or charged with power, your armor charge with that. And then these would work the same, but just with that specific thing. So it would also be based off of the number of what that stat does normally. So something like Innovation, right? The grenade one where you pick up an orb power gives you grenade energy. This one will work now where it's basically taking that, what would be like 5% additive to what you're already getting for a fire sprite, right? So if I'm picking up a fire sprite and I'm running full solar, that's like a 20% pip. Multiplicatively, this is a 5% additively, which doesn't feel a lot, but when you multiply it by the 20%, that's when it starts ramping up, right? So if you build into it, this will give you more, but this is also going to be then treated as like a stat fix for you to, while you're working towards your perfect stat sticked armor. So these mods would exist more so as a way to boost, these orb pickup ones would act as a way to kind of more min-max your armor till you get your perfect set of armor. So it's a way to kind of like negate, like this feels really good right now, but I would really love to have more of these stats evened out, right? Like I would want to have class up more by 10. I would want to have this down by 3. I would want to have this up by 10, so on and so forth. I would be able to go in and mastercraft those specifically to what I want using those mods and using the tuning mods on the armor. Once I get to the higher tier, that's when I get to do it more specifically in larger chunks. I can't bring anything over 200. The only way that anything goes over 200 is through using the font kickstart mods, which will be the same mod as 1. So, like, you're using your grenade font, you're using your grenade kickstart, those would be 1 mod. If you're using firepower, that would be now tied to the elemental pickup of what you're doing. So this orb of power mechanic wouldn't be here as orb of power, it would be fire sprites. These mods would exist to reduce the cooldown between fire sprite generations for things. Because as you know, on a Starfire Protocol Warlock, if you look here on my Starfire Protocol Warlock, I get 2 fusion grenades, right? I get 2 fusion grenades off the rip using Starfire Protocol. Fusion grenades have additional charge and recharge from empowered weapon damage. With empowered weapon damage granting more energy, final defeating with fusion grenades grant your class ability energy. So, using that system, the way that I would go through to get, these specific stats in the way that I want them to be, I would need to go through to do, I would need to use the stat fixes to do so. So that's the other part of the gist there. I have got to put on my chart. There we go. So yeah, this is still out of skew. I'll fix this later, but basically that's the idea, right? Is you go through and you choose the specific stuff according to what you need, right? On a Well of Radiance Warlock, I really only need 100 super. I only need that much class, and weapons is pretty good for that right now as is, right? This is dang near perfect, honestly. The only thing I would need to change, I think, is like maybe put another class mod on, or lower the weapon somehow. But I don't need to. But yeah, so you would weapon armor crafting would be more so building your stat stick to be where you need it to be. The artifact would now become a stat stick where it is more specifically related to your subclass, more specifically related to like what you're wanting the artifact to focus on weapon wise. And then now I hear you bringing up the next point. Well, what about champion mods? If all the artifacts are permanent, how are champion mods going to work? So glad you asked. With champion mods, they're now going to be related to what slot you have what slot of your weapons you want to deal with it, right? So you would go in, and let's say I want kinetic to be anti-barrier. Actually, no, we'll just do this because now I have all of them shown up, right? Because Dragon's Breath stuns overloads. Stuns unstoppable champions. So, right now, how the system works is you need an artifact mod to grant these weapons anti-barrier or overload and the subclass abilities, right? What this new system would mean is you would choose which weapon slot you want to deal with specific champions. So if you want your primary slot to deal with anti-champion, anti-barrier, you would have your primary be anti-barrier. If you wanted your secondary to be overload, you would choose here to have your secondary weapon be overload. So like your first slot, your second slot, your tertiary slot. So you got primary, secondary, tertiary, right? You would go in and choose where you wanted that to be, right? We're also going to change how the elements work, whereas tertiary weapons are all 3 elements like heavy. They're still going to be heavies. This system will basically still be the same, but the difference is then now you can have it where if you want to run like double special stasis weapons, you could do that. You could run double special primary weapons, you could do that. You would just have to have it put in those slots. So you would choose your slot here for what you want your anti-champion mods to be for the slot, depending on what your ammo is. And then if you wanted to do like a full strand kit using full strand weapons, you could choose where to put that weapon at. There would be limitations, obviously, but the point of it is like if you wanted to go full strand, you could go full strand. If you wanted to go full stasis, you could go full stasis. If you wanted to go full any of the subclass elements, you could go full subclass element, right? You'd be able to choose where you want that stuff to be. So it's kind of closer to the D1 weapon system in the sense that your primary, your secondary, and your tertiary. So you'll have your primary ammo, your special ammo, your heavy ammo. That's the SWAT system that it'll go to. All elements will be available in the special slot. All elements will be available in the kinetic slot. and you can choose to run double special, but you would have to have the specific weapon tier stat to get there. So, meaning when you're at 100, that's when you can do double special. So, if you like running double special, you would have to get to 100 weapon stat in order to like choose where you want that to go. And that would be one of the reasons why, if you wanted to min max your artifact and stuff properly, everything's base 100. Everything's base 100. Because there are specific stats that you want to have at 100 no matter what for specific builds. And that's the point of build crafting. That would be the point of min maxing. Realistically, primary weapons feel strong if you build them to do stuff for your subclass and help you get things that synergize with your subclass. They are not meant to be an ad clearing weapon. They are a tool to empower your ad clear and your boss damaging weapons, right? This gun is meant to kill trash. This gun is not meant to kill champions. It's never designed to kill champions because it is infinite ammo now. If they're to bring it back where there is limited ammo for primary weapons, you would need to have it where then yes, it feels good to use against champions. Yes, it feels good to use against anything else. I play often at lower power delta than what I'm at, so my Mida mini tool never feels bad unless I'm like above negative 30. Like if I'm fighting things that are like I'm under it by 40 levels, that's when that starts to feel bad. And that makes sense because I'm under it by 40 levels, right? That's the power delta difference. So with this new system, you would be able to equip one special, one primary, one heavy. You can only ever equip one heavy. In order to equip 2 special ammo weapons, you would need to have your weapon stat at 100. With that system, we will introduce new heavy weapons that are basically special ammo weapons, but in the heavy slot. So, like, you would have rail guns, which would be heavy ammo sniper rifles, basically, right? Kind of like what a linear fusion rifle is, or like a crossbow. You would have a heavy ammo sniper rifle being available there. They are meant to be like, it would be like basically running a Barrett 50 cal here, right? So, with that in mind, there would be some weapons that you could put in here in the heavy slot that would use heavy ammo versus primary or special ammo. But they would have they would be what would be known as a mythic weapon. They're weapons that are specifically more than exotic. They are outliers to the specific stata quo, which would be a way for people to get around the 100 weapon stat to run double special. Is one of the specials would need to be a mythic weapon. Mythic weapons would be the rarest of the rare drops that you could find, and they're basically like a curated role from end game activity. So like if you get a mythic mint retrograde, for example, it would be a curated role of mint and retrograde that acts like an exotic as far as like what it can do, but it would have, going back to the mastercrafted weapon system, it would have 2 origin traits active on it at a time, and it would be curated. So like let's say the mythic mint retrograde is Envious Arsenal bait and switch. That's a pretty solid roll. I think everybody would love that roll, right? One of the best damage dealing perks for end game activities, and a really good synergy perk for everything else that you do. So the nice thing about using something like Envious Arsenal in a lot of end game activities is if you're using bait and switch already on a gun, you're already cycling through. So that would encourage you to kind of build into that specific thing in a way that allows you to min-max your loadout. So an example would be if I'm running bait and switch Envious Arsenal on my mint retrograde, I would also want to run Envious Arsenal bait and switch on my heavy, right? So if I get the mythic drop of mint retrograde, it allows me to equip it so long as I have an exotic weapon equipped. So in order to use a mythic grade weapon, you would have to have an exotic weapon equipped. You can run 1 mythic weapon, 1 exotic weapon, 1 exotic piece of armor, 1 mythic piece of armor. While we were talking about mythic armor, while we were talking about mythic weapons, we're also going to start talking about mythic armor and how they work. Mythic armor are going to work as the class exotics, essentially. So what I mean by that is, you see how this I can't say that, slopolism? Yeah, slopolism. We'll call it slopolism. With slopolism, you have two perks, right? You got there. There are two perks, but what they will be different to than what it currently is they'll be related to an aspect of the class that you do. This is a perfect example of this. This is a set of perks that are related to one specific thing on warlocks that warlocks can do alone. You know what that is? Riftcast. Spirit of Starfire works specifically around empowered weapon damage, which you have the Empowering Rift that gives you empowered weapon damage. You can also get empowered weapons through Radiant, and then Spirit of Filaments. When you use an Empowering Rift, you gain Devour. You know what those two share in common that help with using your Rift? Both these things will increase the recharge rate of your grenade. I have not used this combination yet, and I've been waiting to use this because this is going to be my backup plan for when everything gets nuked into the ground with something that I'm using currently, like the current setup I have on my Prismatic Warlock with where is it? This one, where I have Inmost Light and Starfire. Once this gets nerfed and Devour gets nerfed, that is how I'm going to be getting around the nerf, is with that combination. But the mythic class item will be something where it ties into a specific part of your class that is a straight up part of what the class identity is, right? So for warlocks, it would be some stuff related to your rift or your phoenix dive, your class ability. It would be stuff related to your specific aspects. An example would be you could get a mythic class item where it gives you on rift cast, give yourself a temporary touch of flame buff. When on class ability cast, give yourself, I mean, Hellion kind of already works that way, but like you could then take Hellion, which already is a limited thing, and that could be on your mythic class item. Mythic class items would be rewarded based off of pinnacle endgame activities. They would drop randomly from raids, they would drop randomly from doing endgame conquests and stuff, and you would get one of your choosing at the end of the campaign that you play. So for those that don't want to focus on RNG loot grind, can choose the specific one they want and then get one that is specifically tailored to the build that they are trying to do later on. When you're done with the main campaign, you basically got the average of the class mastered, is the idea. Once you get into post campaign, that's when you start building into more of the specific parts of the class. You go from being the jack of all trades to your class to the master of all, right? So right now there are, let's say, 5 different branches you can master on a class with all the umpteen 100 different combinations in between. The campaign will teach you to master each element. The low rank will be that. The high rank will be starting to mess with more elements. And then master rank and beyond, like your end game, is where you really start getting into the build crafting and loot chase for the game. The campaign will let you basically get to one specific build you really, really like. Once you complete the campaign, that's when the gate unlatches and there are corpses shifted to offer room for the amount of builds and bodies you're going to be going through to build up stuff. The next thing about it is upgrading exotics. So the one thing that stinks about this system right now is you're limited on your stats by sometimes even close to 20, if not more, because of the exotic that you're running, right? So if I'm to use an exotic right now in the game, it is a lower stat total that I can get here. With the new system, you can upgrade exotics through tiers by dumping the exotic into that. But the difference is the exotic has to match the stat distribution that is already on the exotic. So if I have a Grenadier exotic, I have a Grenadier exotic like this one, right? I have Starfire Protocol Grenadier. In order to upgrade this one tier, I need to give it Grenadier Starfire Protocols. That would be the way to do that. That would be how I'd get this to tier 5. You know, you get a lot of exotic engrams handed to you. You can focus them specifically at Raoul to be the type that you want them to be, and then you would go in and choose the specific ones that you want from there. So, engram drops, you get it here. You choose the ghost mod for the armor that you want to drop. You go to Raoul, and you pick the armor that you're after. Exotic armor can drop at random tiers, so they don't start off as a tier 2 equivalent, right? This would be a tier 2 equivalent. You could get them dropping from tier 1 to what would be essentially mastercrafted. Exotics would be the only thing that you can mastercraft armor-wise outside of the mythic items and endgame raid loot. But you would only be able to, with endgame raid loot, pinnacle ops, dungeons, trials. The only way you can mastercraft that is once you own the badge that shows that you have mastery of that specific thing. So I hear you saying, how does somebody that never plays trials expect to understand how to make trials work in the sense that is fulfilling and engaging to people that play trials and want to be able to mastercraft their things? Easy peasy lemon squeezy. You know how you have all these different badges for the different pieces of gear, right? You have this all here. Well, with trials, you would have the trials armor set that you'd have to earn on all counts, right? All your characters. Then you'd have to have the specific trials weapons at your disposal, to get as well. And so when trials gets its loot refresh, you would have to do that again on trials. Now, I hear you saying, well, that kind of sucks because then I can't mastercraft my old weapons. You can mastercraft your old weapons if you've completed that badge from before or the current badge. So if you've completed the badge that had these 6 weapons in it, you can mastercraft these 6 weapons by going flawless to the lighthouse. You can mastercraft the armor from trials by going to the lighthouse. You'll notice how I'm not going over the class item because class item now is a mythic item that you can always have on you that you use in tandem with an exotic, right? So that's a way to enhance the weapon system and the game that currently exists in a way that would work for changing the system while still making it feel well and good for the future. Because now the only things you have to focus on armor wise and stat wise, because this you can mastercraft this to be whatever you need it to be. You could go in and your loot chase then is for the specific niches of it. So like with exotics have their base stuff already, right? Like your Fellwinter's Helm will always come with the specific class type associated with it, right? Based off of what it does. So like all Sunbracers are always going to be Grenader if you pull them from collections. You can build into them to being different ones based off of what the random drop is you get, or the one that you decrypt at Raoul based off your ghost mod. So let's say I want a Fellwinter Helm. That's Paragon and not Brawler because I don't need health. I don't want to have health stat. I can focus that at Raoul. And then, the most stats that I can have on my character are 100 in each slot, with 2 being up to 200. I mean, yeah, I would still have like 0 stats then, but that's where some of the stuff that would come in from like master crafting, like masterworking your weapon. So like a masterwork weapon, it gives you the stat. It would also give you a pip to your weapon stat here, so you can always be at a certain specific stat. There are going to be some things though that will have to be balanced accordingly, and this is kind of all work in progress because how I was talking about like mythic weapons having the specific in order to run a mythic weapon you need to have an exotic weapon equipped unless you have over 100 weapon stat. Those things would have to be checked in with what would feel good gameplay wise. And I think that's part of the reason why Bungie's been so hesitant about trying to do more with this system, because they're scared of, I mean, we're already power creeped as is because of all the enhanced perks and stuff that can drop on guns, but realistically, if this is the only role I'm ever going to use on my Might of Mini tool, it doesn't matter if it's tier 4 or tier 5. Because everything is already enhanced. The difference that would come from this being higher than that would be if I was to go in and choose something specific to what the sorry, I got to change this back because it's driving. What I'm doing outside of this stuff here. See, this is about hour 45. So like master crafting weapons would give you additional stats. Stats can't go over 200. If you bring something over 200, it doesn't give you an additional bonus. The only way to get over 200 bonus stat is through things like surges, things like your font, kickstart mods, so on and so forth. Font and kickstart will work in the sense of like when you have armor charge, it gives you that cooldown. And when you have armor charge, throwing it gives you a bump in stat per armor charge. So you have a max of, let's say, the max of 6 armor charges, right? Because you won't be able to stack on stacks. I'll change it to where perks like stacks on stacks, you can't do multiple of. The most you can go to is 4. That's a minute. That is a minute worth of cooldown ability and everything else. That is a lot. The only things you can stack still would be like surges, because weapon surges will work slightly differently than like you're boosting your weapons font. So like this system. So like this is just a flat weapon bonus. So like if you're to have 100 weapon and do this, it would be the bonus of like whatever 120 would be. And you could stack that. So if you have 200 weapons, you can stack that higher. But these are specifically tied to the weapon element, whereas this is weapons in general. So this is a base. This will be that. So the most armor charge stacks you can have will be 4. So something like stacks on stacks might actually just be gotten rid of, and this system elemental charge will just be baked into the new weapons, the new surge system, because orbs of power won't exist in the same way that they do now. They will be a pip related to the subclass that you're running. So like if you're running full solar, running full stasis, so on and so forth, transcendent, prismatic, you'll be getting those elemental pickups based off of what your abilities are. Your super will make fire sprites, your melee and grenade will make fire sprites if you're running solar stuff. The only time Orbs of Power will come back is with the new subclass that's being introduced, that I would introduce in the first expansion of Destiny 3, called, working title, but we're calling it Resonance right now. Resonance will work is a supplement to kinetic weapons, where the kinetic weapons would be the things that give you the pip, the pickups related. So like a kinetic weapon would create an Orb of Power, which is just a basic orb of energy that you pick up that helps with like the neutral game stuff of your class. So like healing, so like things of that nature. So it's neutral. Once resonance is introduced, those will get buffed to increase what would be the darkness aspect of resonance. So there won't be resonant weapons introduced as much as the kinetic weapons will just now function with resonance as a darkness ability. So that way then you have something where kinetic can do more than just apply to every subclass. It applies to resonance more so than anything else. And then as you go through the expansion for resonance, when that subclass gets dropped, that's when you start getting more, the other stuff for here. So like year 1 of Destiny 3 is unlocking the different supers for the subclasses that are missing supers available to you. And they'll kind of be different because I don't think, Void Hunter has 3. I think the only I think Titan's the only Void class that doesn't have. No, it has Twilight Arsenal. Never mind. So whatever subclass is missing a super is basically going to be the one that will get supers in the campaign of the year 1 of Destiny 3. And then the first major expansion, they'll introduce Resonance. And then subsequently after that is when you introduce more stuff for Resonance and more stuff for build synergy, introduce new weapon archetypes, new things that you can craft your weapons into. because transmog exists for everything. You can choose a style, like a foundry style that you like for your mythic and legendary weapons. And then, well, actually, maybe not mythic weapons, but we'll touch base back on that because you kind of need a mythic weapon to stand out so people know that it's a mythic weapon. But you can like change the, you can still change what the gun looks like. Armor transmog would exist. Exotic transmog that's coming in Renegades will also exist in the same way that does now. But yeah, I think that's all I got to say today about this. There's more that I've written down, but I've already been yapping for 2 hours and I can feel it in my throat. So I'm going to call it there. Again, this wasn't meant to be anything major. This wasn't meant to be anything crazy. This is kind of just me giving my thoughts about what I want the base game of Destiny 3 to feel like if it is going to be a thing. I think this is a good way so far of the different things that I've talked about, where you can have your MMO stat sticks and your loot chase and have a system in place where it's like, you can eventually get to the point where it's like you can get mythic versions of all guns available to you. That's your loot chase, on top of getting to your 5 mastercrafted versions of the weapons, on top of getting mastercrafted versions of armor, getting exotics up to mastercrafted armor, mythic class items, because the exotic class items will no longer exist. It'll just be part of the class item system itself, where it's a combination of giving you an additional aspect from your prismatic class, that, and then also giving you a, like a different part of your class ability kit that uses. So like an example would be like how in Most Light, using an ability would give you reduced cooldowns for all your other abilities. That I would consider neutral because it's not tied to a get out of my way, to a specific one part of your subclass. It's specific to all of them. Or like your Rift, or Grenade Cast, or Melee Cast, or Super Cast, right? Those would all be considered neutral. This would be something like an aspect from your subclass tree that you can choose. Like your fragment, right? So this would be a fragment. This would be part of the neutral game. So like if you wanted to focus on a really good, like in Most Light build, let's say, you would run. And I know it's like, well, we have Heart of Inmost Light as a Titan exotic. Yeah. It would be fun for a Titan to be able to build craft into an absolute ability spamming behemoth upon proccing their, that. I mean, it wouldn't be as strong as the actual exotic, but it would still give that neutral game boost of being able to be used on everything, right? It doesn't, like the Inmost Light one on Titan boosts the damage of the ability. The mythic class item that would have Inmost Light on it wouldn't boost the damage. It would just boost the regen. The exotic would boost both. The mythic would only boost the one. The mythic would only boost... Like an example would be for this too, is when you go to cast your barricade on Titan, it would give you Devour. Right? You would take on class ability use, grant Devour. On class ability use, grant Radiant, stuff like that. So you can tie that into this specifically outside of here, allowing you not only to have a better system for dealing with champions, because you could already choose where you want your anti-champion mods to go to. You can build craft into running double special, where there is no downside to it besides just you have to have 100 weapon stat, or run a mythic weapon with an exotic, which people do. The only thing that would suffer is maybe like your heavy ammo generation or so on and so forth, depending on where you have your exotic weapon at and where you have your mythic weapon at. It would also, be able to limit, like if you want to run double special, one of your special ammo weapons has to be a mythic or an exotic. You'd have to have like an exotic weapon available for you to use here, or have one on already. But other than that, I think that's kind of everything. Let me know in the comments on the YouTube VOD when this gets uploaded there what you guys think. I'll try to get this out soon. I am going to be leaving here shortly to go visit with family. I do hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you all so very much for tuning in. I appreciate you guys stopping by. I'm gonna go on that walk now, Kasuna. So I, can honor your redeem there. And yeah, I think that covers what I wanted to yap about. At some point, though, we will go in to talk more about this system once I actually properly work on it. This is kind of like the proof of concept things that I want for the base part of the game. There are more things that I want to talk about in regards to the portal system, the destination system, and so on and so forth. But that'll be for another time. I want to thank you guys again so very much for tuning in. I hope you all have a great day, and I will catch you all next time. Take care.